Okay, let's unpack this. We talk about a lot of different things on this show, history, tech, the economy. But
Yeah.
today we are walking straight into the chaos engine.
That is honestly the perfect description for it. We are entering a world where rigid probability meets absolute narrative insanity.
We are diving deep to week 1 of the finals for AFT Dice Season 11, specifically the games from Thursday, February 5, 2026.
Right.
And for anyone listening who might be thinking, wait, this is a sports simulation, just stick with us. Because what happened in these 4 games,
Yeah.
it's a perfect case study in statistics, strategy, and how random numbers can tell a genuinely heartbreaking story.
Exactly. This isn't just about who won or lost. It's about variance. It's about that clutch factor. We've got 4 games to analyze today, and frankly, the statistical anomalies we saw, you might not see them in 100 years of real-life sports.
I am still trying to wrap my head around the first game, but before we get to the math, let's set the stakes. Who are we watching here?
We're watching the elite, the top 8. But the real narrative hook for me is what I'm calling the Dynasty War.
Okay.
We have the champions from Season 8, Season 9, and Season 10 all in this finals mix. It's a massive test of pedigree versus, the new challengers.
So it's the established kings versus the usurpers, all decided by the roll of a die. And we start with a game that I think might have broken the probability model completely. Game 1, the first qualifying final, Brisbane Lions hosting Melbourne at the Gabba.
This was the heavyweight bout right out of the gate, and the stakes are huge. Winner gets a golden ticket straight to the preliminary final, a week off.
And the loser.
The loser gets thrown right into the shark tank of the semifinals. No second chances.
And looking at the data from the first quarter, if you were a Brisbane fan, you were probably hiding behind the sofa. It didn't look like a contest.
It was a mauling. Melbourne came out and put 6-4 on the board. Brisbane, meanwhile, could barely find the goals. They scraped together just 25 total points.
So pause there. In a dice simulation, a gap that big that early,
Yeah.
that usually signals a blowout.
Right, it often does. Because for Brisbane to come back, they don't just need to roll well, they need Melbourne to suddenly start rolling terribly.
Right.
But in this specific case, the variance actually did swing, and it swung hard in the second quarter. Brisbane just found their accuracy. They kicked 4 goals 6.
Well, Melbourne's offense. What happened?
It just evaporated. They only put up 14 points in the entire quarter.
It's amazing how the momentum, if we can even call it that, just flipped. So we go into halftime, and the score is Melbourne 50, Brisbane 47.
A 3-point ball game.
Wow.
Which is statistically a dead heat. You've gone from a blowout to a knife edge in 30 minutes of simulated time.
The third quarter felt like a grind. It seemed like Melbourne was trying to, break that tether again, but Brisbane just kept hanging on.
Melbourne did win the quarter, but only just. They pushed the lead out 7 points, 74-67. And now, in the fourth, this is where things get really weird.
This is the moment that had everyone watching the feed just scratching their heads. The regulation siren goes. The game ends. And I'm looking at the score. Brisbane 107. Melbourne 107.
A perfect equilibrium. 15 goals, 17 behinds apiece. Think about the odds of that. Hundreds of inputs, offensive roles, defensive roles, and they land on the exact same number.
It's almost poetic. But you can't have a draw in a final. We need a winner.
Yeah.
So walk us through the fifth quarter.
Right, overtime. It's not sudden death. It's basically a mini quarter. A whole new set of scoring simulations added to the total. It's an endurance test, really.
And in that extra period, the dam finally broke.
It shattered. Brisbane went supernova in just that short overtime. They slammed home 4 goals 3.
And Melbourne?
They completely stalled. 1 goal, 6 behinds.
That inaccuracy in the crucial moment, that is just killer. 7 scoring shots and only 1 goal.
It's the story of the game, right? Brisbane was clinical when it mattered most. The final score, adding overtime, was Brisbane 134 to Melbourne 119, a 15-point win.
That margin feels so deceptive, though. It looks comfortable on paper, but that game was a coin flip until the very end.
Completely. But the result is all that matters. Brisbane gets the rest. Melbourne, despite matching them for 4 quarters, is sent to a do-or-die semi.
That is just brutal. Okay, let's pivot. Game 2, the second qualifying final, we're at Optus Stadium. West Coast Eagles versus St. Kilda.
And this is that battle of champions I mentioned. St. Kilda won Season 9. West Coast are the reigning champs from Season 10, heavyweight versus heavyweight.
And West Coast has that home ground advantage at Optus. That usually provides a slight buffer in the simulation, doesn't it?
It does. A slight probability till you expect the home team to win the close ones. But St. Kilda clearly didn't care about the algorithm. They came out marching.
They were incredibly efficient. I'm looking at the second quarter stats here. St. Kilda, 4 goals, 1 behind.
Yeah.
West Coast, 2 goals, 4 behinds.
And that right there is the difference. Accuracy. St. Kilda converted their chances into maximum points. West Coast was wasteful. By halftime, St. Kilda had a 17-point lead.
But West Coast, they didn't just roll over. They're the champs for a reason.
No, they rallied hard in the third. They actually won the quarter, cut the deficit down to just 8 points. It set up a grandstand finish.
But they couldn't close the deal.
They couldn't. And again, it comes down to that efficiency. Look at the final scoreline. St. Kilda 93 defeats West Coast 87.
Wait, let me do the math there. West Coast had 12 goals and 15 behinds. That's 27 scoring shots. St. Kilda had 14 and 9. That's only 23 scoring shots.
Exactly.
West Coast actually generated more offense.
Precisely. If this were a territory battle, West Coast won. But the simulation punishes inaccuracy. Bad kicking is bad football, as they say, and it holds true even when the players are digital.
So St. Kilda moves on. They've proven they're still a powerhouse. And West Coast, the defending champs, are now on the brink of elimination.
Shakes up the whole bracket. Their path to a back-to-back title just got infinitely harder.
Speaking of no safety nets, let's look at the elimination finals. These are the winner-go-home games. Game 3, Richmond versus the GWS Giants at the MCG.
This game, it had a very different texture to the first two. This wasn't a thriller. This was a statement.
It really felt like the Giants were angry.
If a simulation can feel anger, GWS was furious. Remember, they're the Season 8 premieres. They see themselves as royalty. They came out against Richmond with this frightening mindset.
The first quarter stats are just ugly for Richmond fans. GWS 30, Richmond 8.
A 22-point lead at the first change. And in a high-pressure elimination final, that forces the trailing team to take risks. And often that just opens the door for the other team to score more.
Which is exactly what happened. The lead ballooned to 35 points by halftime.
And they just maintained that control. The third quarter ended, they're up by 37. At that point, the game is effectively over.
Yeah.
Richmond was just playing for pride.
The final siren confirms it. GWS 105, Richmond 80. A 25-point win in the end, but it felt wider than that.
It definitely did. Richmond never really looked like they were in the contest. So they're the first team officially eliminated from Season 11. Season over.
It's a tough end. But for GWS, that's a massive confidence booster. They didn't just scrape through, they dominated.
It sends a message to the other teams. We are here to win the whole thing.
We'll touch on that momentum idea later. But first, the final game of the week. Game 4. Geelong versus Gold Coast Suns.
The second elimination final down at GMHBA Stadium.
And for anyone who doesn't know, GMHBA Stadium is a fortress. It's narrow, it's windy. The home team wins there at a ridiculous rate.
Even in the simulation, the home ground factor for Geelong is significant. Gold Coast were the heavy underdogs coming in.
And yet this game gave us the most agonizing finish of the entire week. Even more than the draw, I think.
I agree. The draw was a spectacle. This was a tragedy. It was wire to wire. First quarter, Gold Coast sneaks ahead, 25-22.
And then the second quarter had another one of those weird statistical synchronicities.
It did. Both teams kicked exactly 6 goals, 4 behinds. Identical. So that 3-point margin, it just stayed frozen at halftime. Gold Coast 57, Geelong 54.
The tension is just building. Neither team can break away. Third quarter, Gold Coast manages to stretch it a little.
Pushed it out to 9 points. Now, a 9-point lead at GMHBA against Geelong in the fourth. That is not safe. You know the Cats are going to come charging home.
And they did. The data shows this massive surge for Geelong in the fourth. They were rolling high. They were coming for them.
But Gold Coast just hung on.
The final siren goes. And I honestly had to triple-check this figure. Gold Coast wins by 1 single point.
The smallest possible margin, 1 point.
Can we even quantify how much that hurts? To play a whole season, get a home final, fight back like that, and lose by 1 point.
It's the ultimate heartbreak. Mathematically, it's one minor score, one ball hitting the post. That is the difference between planning for next week and cleaning out your locker.
And for the Gold Coast Suns to go into that fortress and win by a point, that is just incredible resilience.
It changes the perception of their team. They just knocked out a perennial contender on their own turf. A massive scalp.
So Geelong is eliminated, done, and Gold Coast survives.
And just think about the contrast. We had a draw, a 6-point game, a blowout, and a 1-point heartbreaker. This week had everything.
If you scripted this, people would say it's too unrealistic.
Exactly. That's the beauty of the dice. Probability doesn't care if it makes sense. It just is.
So let's look at the carnage. Richmond and Geelong are out. Where is everyone going for week 2?
We move to the semifinals. Sudden death.
First up,
The first semifinal. Melbourne, still probably recovering from that overtime loss, have to host the GWS Giants at the MCG.
ooh, that is a fascinating matchup. Melbourne's the higher seed, but coming off a loss. GWS is lower, but coming off a dominant win.
It's that classic momentum versus class debate. GWS looks dangerous. Melbourne needs to reset and fast. The winner of that game gets to play St. Kilda.
And the second semifinal?
That one's at Optus Stadium. The West Coast Eagles, trying to bounce back, will host the Gold Coast Suns.
So the Suns have to travel all the way to Perth. That's the longest road trip in football.
It is. They're flying high after that 1-point miracle. But traveling to Optus to face the reigning champs, that is a mountain to climb.
And the winner of that game gets Brisbane at the Gabba.
Correct. So the road for the Suns is win at Geelong, win at West Coast, win at Brisbane, just to make the grand final. It's a gauntlet.
If they pull that off, build them a statue.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned. We keep using this word momentum. We saw Brisbane get on a roll. We saw GWS steamroll Richmond. But we are talking about dice. Does momentum actually exist?
It's the fundamental philosophical question of AFT dicey, isn't it? In a purely mathematical sense. No, the dice don't know the last roll. A 6 is just as likely to follow a 6 as a 1.
But it sure feels like they cluster. When a team starts kicking goals, it feels like the probability shifts.
That's the human brain looking for patterns. We see 3 goals in a row and say they have momentum, when really it might just be a standard statistical cluster. However, seeing Brisbane score like they did in overtime, seeing GWS just dominate, it's hard not to ascribe some sort of hot hand narrative to it.
So maybe we just love the story too much to accept that it's all random.
I think that's why we watch. We project our humanity onto the random numbers. We see resilience where there's only probability. We see courage where there's only variance.
And I love that. Whether it's math or magic, I am here for it.
As am I.
That's it for our deep dive into week 1. We've got the semifinals coming up. Melbourne versus GWS and West Coast versus Gold Coast. 2 teams go through, 2 go home. We'll be back to break it all down.
Until then, keep rolling.
Thanks for listening.